brilliant engineer.
Is there another Tesla that you're looking for, or another sector that you think the next Tesla could come from?
Has a chance to be even bigger than Tesla in the 2030s. And I think that ultimately it could be bigger than Tesla. So that's one area. You don't find a lot of these companies.
Every time Tesla announces something like this, two things happen. The stock quickly runs out and it later resold for 10 times more. So basically, it's more of a small investment than a mere decor.
We're doing a massive discount. You can get yours for less than 15 bucks, but just for the first 50 orders.
Like in Tesla, we are having the leading company that makes electric cars, and that led to autonomous driving. And autonomous driving is something that ultimately we're going to be able to charge. Tesla will be able to charge $2,000, roughly $2,000, $2,500 a year at least, for the ability for this car to drive, by itself. And so we think that by this period of time, over say 7 or 8 years, over the next, the Tesla can be doing 15 million cars a year, 20 million cars a year, and ultimately they're going to have other, which will be a fifth or a quarter of all the cars that are made, but all the cars will have the use of the autonomous driving that Tesla is going to be providing to them.
You've invested essentially not only in these two companies in a big way, but in one man. How do you account for that risk reward? There's something known as a key man risk. How do you think about that bet?
When I was in Palo Alto, they gave us access. Elon gave us access to meet with the head of compute and also with the head of autonomous driving, and for a half hour apiece. He doesn't want those people talking to investors. He wants them working in the business. And the compute person, his dad was an immigrant coming from Ireland, and he worked in a kitchen. And he goes to school and he becomes a brilliant computer guy. And he gets a job at Apple ultimately, and he runs the Apple, the Apple business, the Apple Compute, very, very important business. And then he gets recruited to go to Tesla, and he's now 8 years at Tesla running that business. He says he has no turnover. Everyone there who works for him is wealthy, but there's all a mission. So I said, well, so why did you leave Apple to go to Tesla? He says, well, Ron, at Apple, I had a very important role there, and Tim and Steve Jobs never came to visit me once, not once. And for when he's at Tesla, Elon comes in every quarter for a couple, 3 hours, and we talk. And he comes off initially with a big, broad question, and then he drills down. And the question, he says, I can answer the question first, and then he keeps drilling down, and he says, oh my God, how could he ask that question? How do I not know the answer to that one? So the basic is, he says, there is not another company that he's aware of where there's a brilliant engineer with a photographic memory who remembers everything and can transport information that he gets from one area to another. So he's a brilliant guy. He cares about everything he does, and he is interested in how everything works. So James Gorman goes to visit him from Morgan Stanley, goes to visit him and tells me about this story about walking through the factory and stopping at every station and him knowing the name of everyone there and what everyone does. And Walter Isaacson tells me, who wrote the book on Elon, tells me he's walking through, he was with him for 2 years. And he says, I have one example, Ron, he says, I'm walking through a plant with him and some engineers working on a valve that they can't figure out how to make it work. And Elon looks at it, as he's just on the fly, looks at it and says, do this, boo, 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 do this, and then keeps walking. They try it and it works. And so everything this guy does is like that. So now how do I get comfortable with one person being so brilliant and being in charge? This is like Da Vinci. This is like a businessman. This is Da Vinci.
Stocks, old news. Get in on the action with limited edition Tesla models where returns skyrocket. Plus, every purchase from our official website comes with a guarantee of premium resale value in the future. Don't miss out. Grab yours now.
If you are an individual and you are a graduate of a top engineering school, you want to work for either SpaceX or Tesla. So you want to work with other brilliant people. You want to work on a mission. You want to work in something that's really important. You want to work in something that you think is going to be relevant and fascinating with other people like you. And he gets the greatest people. He had 3.5 million people apply for jobs last year at SpaceX and Tesla. 3.5 million people, 30,000 jobs. It's harder to get into getting a job at Tesla and SpaceX than to go into Harvard. So they have amazing engineers that are all, motivated, highly motivated to accomplish a goal, and that's what they're going to do. So whether Elon's there, of course, it's riskier when the company's smaller than when it becomes larger. But as you grow, I'm betting that he's going to stay alive for at least 5 or 10 years. I think that's a good bet. We'll see.
Now we have two wars going on around the globe. Just recently, a hedge fund legend, Paul Tudor Jones, said it's really tough to own stocks here, given the geopolitical risks and the U.S. fiscal situation. Do you want to own stocks from here? And what is your outlook for the stock market and the economy right now?
So I started as an analyst in 1970, and I was in debt and living in my friend's basement, and I had $600 of cash. And my credit was so bad that when I wanted to get a telephone, I couldn't get a telephone. They said they don't want a $600 deposit. I said, if I give you $600, I won't have money to get to work and I won't be able to pay the bill every month. And they said, well, I'm sorry, we can't give you a phone. So ultimately, there was a payphone in the lobby, and I asked the doorman to please answer the phone, Ron Barron's residence, Mr. Barron's residence. And so girls will be calling, and so answer the phone, and then just ring me up and I'll run down the stairs and they'll think I have a butler. So that was my plan originally. And so I had, zero. And in fact, I know Paul Tudor Jones from 1987, and he and I were on Barron's Roundtable together for several years. And, amazing guy. And he called the market crash in 1987. And that's what made him so successful, I think. He wouldn't have been successful anyway. He's a really smart guy. But he's a trader. I'm an investor. And so the way I look at the world is that when I became interested, I went to law school at night on a scholarship and worked in the patent office at daytime in the 1960s. And that was draft exempt, so I didn't have to go to Vietnam. But when I think about in the 1960s, when Robert Kennedy ran for president, the real Robert Kennedy, ran for president, 1968, the GDP of our country was $800 billion. Now 27 trillion. So basically it's up. So in the 1960s, there were assassinations, there was Vietnam, there was March on Washington, there was civil rights. President Kennedy was assassinated, Martin Luther King was assassinated, Robert Kennedy was assassinated. I mean, just the cities were on fire. They were being burned because of after King was killed. And yet, it felt like everything's coming apart. And yet, the Dow Jones was then 1,000.
Crafted by Tesla Design Studios, this masterpiece replicates every detail of the iconic Cybertruck. For the lucky first 50 orders, we'll get it for less than $15.
It's now 34,000, 34 times, and the GDP was then 800 billion. It's now 27 trillion, 34 times. So basically, and that's about 7% a year growth, and it's about 4 or 5% inflation and about 2% real. And I happen to think that, and since now we are to 2023, we had a pandemic. We have a war going on in Ukraine. We have a horrible war going on in Israel. We have, inflation. You had inflation in the 1960s also. Interest rates higher now, 5 or 6%. When Volcker was there, interest rates were 18%. And you had a terrible recession. So we've had recessions, and yet the market's up 34 times. And with 1 year of good news, 1 year, 1989, when the wall came down between East and West Germany, 1 year the news was good. Every other year it's been bad news. And yet the market, so the reason for that is because the value of your money falls in half about every 14 or 15 years. Regardless of what they tell you, we're going to have 2% inflation, for a little bit, but then it'll go back up to 4 or 5 again. But on average, it's going to be 4 or 5% for my entire lifetime. That means everything doubles in price every 14 or 15 years. And the way you can hedge against that is you can invest in the market, which goes up about 10% a year, on average, including dividends and everything. So the way I think about it is that the investments that I have are investments for the long term in businesses where I think we're going to double our money over a period of time. Instead of 10 years, we're going to try to double our money every 5 years, 5 or 6 years. How do we do it? Instead of investing in companies that grow 7 or 8% a year, we're investing in companies that grow 15% plus a year. And then we have a mix. Some of these companies that we're investing in, like a Tesla or like a SpaceX, can grow very, very rapidly, but they're riskier. So we offset that risk by having investments in companies like Vail, which has or Hyatt, real estate companies, resort companies, financial companies like Charles Schwab.
Ron, I think that this buy and hold concept of a concentrated portfolio has worked for you, and it seems to have worked in these markets. Is there another Tesla that you're looking for, or another sector that you think the next Tesla could come from?
I think SpaceX has a chance to be even bigger than Tesla in the 2030s. And that's saying a lot, because I think Teslas can go from being worth $600 or $700 billion now to being worth $4.5 trillion in 10 years. And in SpaceX by 2030 can be worth, 500 billion, 600 billion. And I think that ultimately it can be bigger than Tesla. So that's one area. You don't find a lot of these companies, and therefore when you find them, you better keep them.
First, I thought it was a cool little thing to have around. Later, I discovered that every time Tesla announces something like this, two things happen. The stock quickly runs out and it later resold for 10 times more. So basically, it's more of a small investment than a mere decor. Plus, we guarantee that these products will resell later for a much higher price than you bought them for.
We're doing a massive discount. You can get yours for less than $15, but just for the first 50 orders.